Hello, I'm Marcela Mandiola, Assistant Professor of Alberto Hurtado University. In this class, we will deal with sexual harassment understood as a form of sexual and gender violence. We will see how harassment is treated in international law. We will examine the university as one of its contexts. Finally, we will hold that every research and intervention proposal on harassment must take into account gender inequalities that arise and reproduce at scenarios where it takes place. According to international human rights law, sexual harassment is a behavior of a sexual nature or of any other nature based on sex, not desired by the receiving person, and affecting their dignity as it can be offensive, hostile, or threatening for them. We may highlight three elements on this definition. The behavior of a sexual nature or based on sex, comprising explicit or subtle conducts, isolated or systematic, both in public and private spaces. The lack of consent indicates that the behavior of a sexual nature or based on sex is not welcome or desired by the receiving person. It is important to stress that consent cannot be inferred from silence or the lack of resistance by the person, as it may take place within relations where authority or other forms of power intervene. They are behaviors that directly threaten the person, but also may indirectly create a hostile, offensive, or intimidating environment, affecting their career or educational opportunities. Sexual harassment is a kind of sexual violence. It is characterized by the search for sexual satisfaction by the aggressor through non-consented acts. The World Health Organization has defined sexual violence as any sexual act, attempt to obtain a sexual act, unwanted sexual comments or advances, or acts to traffic or otherwise directed against a person's sexuality using coercion by any person regardless of their relationship to the victim in any setting, including but not limited to home and work. Acts of sexual violence may be catalogued as gender violence acts, as those who perpetrate them are mostly men and their victims women. They are acts that work as control and intimidation mechanisms whose consequences is to maintain women's subordination and perpetrate male domination. Yet, not all gender violence manifests itself as sexual violence. Gender violence is that which entails acts against a person on account of their gender or sex. UNICEF states that gender violence describes deleterious acts perpetrated against a person on the ground of the differences society assigns to men and women. They are acts whose effect is the normalization of a sexist heterocentric order. International human rights law demands from states the adoption of measures aimed at fighting acts of sexual or gender violence, including sexual harassment, as they amount to forms of discrimination and infringement of different rights, depending on where they are perpetrated. This entails obligations to the levels of prevention, protection, investigation, punishment, and reparation of the victims or potential victims of sexual and/or gender violence. The Gender and Sexualities Coordinating Unit of the Catholic University of Valparaiso in Chile conducted a survey in 2015 on sexual violence in university contexts, showing that at least 11.6% of surveyed women suffered violence. From them, 1 out of 3 declares having been abused in a state of vulnerability, and 1 out of 10 declares having been raped. Regarding those committing sexual violence, 74% were students and 16% were faculty. Gender violence at universities does not always take the form of harassment. University may be an institution where masculine-feminine dichotomies are actively produced and reproduced, exposing men and women to different kinds of violence. An example of this is how misogyny and homophobia can normally manifest themselves in academic curriculums and in debates at university classrooms, becoming a mechanism of subordination and oppression against women and non-heterosexual people. They may also manifest themselves in much more complex and invisible ways through collective organizational practices structuring the workplace. When developing action plans against gender violence at the university, it might be useful to take into account some measures adopted by institutions in different places of the world for the fight against gender violence. Gathering information and conducting actions with institutional support for the identification and detection of situations of violence. The explicit condemnation by the university of gender violence is of the essence. Offering attention, advisory and information services to address violence reports, such as emergency hotlines, accompanying tutors and sanitary services, among others. Alternatively, the publication of information on such services in case a university is not able to offer them directly. This includes the creation of units charged with investigating and following up on situations of gender violence at the university, generating strategies and proposing policies for addressing them at an institutional level, with an impact on university governance, training programs, faculty and students' well-being. To promote and support the work of associations working for the eradication of gender violence at universities from different quarters, as well as active engagement with external networks that may support such work. Thanks for your attention. Please visit our website mooc.chile.com and keep following this course.